the F1 Focus Podcast with MV Welman and Griffin.
Formula One Focus on a Thursday. My friend Hugh Griffin is here to talk to us again. And the big news, of course, at the moment is the will he or won't he, or is he or isn't he going to be fired? And of course, we're referring to Liam Lawson. Lots of stories, lots of rumors, lots of sort of confirmations, but nothing official from Red Bull yet as we're recording this. So welcome back, Hugh. And what are you hearing?
I'm just seeing what everybody else is seeing. I'm seeing that Yuki Tsunoda is being promoted into Red Bull and Liam Lawson is going back down to Racing Bulls. We saw it. I think it must have been confirmed pretty early because the rumors started going around. It felt like Sunday evening, like straight after the Grand Prix. And then, yeah, it's just happened very quickly. And I was saying in my race reactions that what is going on here because it's not good enough and it can't be happening again. And they've pulled the trigger already. Like this is, even for Red Bull levels of cutthroatness, this is surprising. This is aggressive. This is toxic behavior. And so, I tipped this team for a fall apart this year, and it seems like it's happening already. I think, and I don't know what your thoughts on it. This feels to me like a bigger symptom of something bigger that's going on at Red Bull.
I definitely agree. Just one more thing that's not been officially confirmed yet. Nothing at all. We haven't heard a squeak from them. All of this, all we've heard is leaked news and stuff like that. I talked about it last night in a Dutch newspaper, and you were surprised because I could understand Dutch or read Dutch. Being from South Africa, I can understand Dutch, guys. There you go. No, the thing is, like I said, number one, it's a symptom of Red Bull not knowing what to do with that second driver and also not knowing how to fix that problem with their second driver. So what they do is they just blame the driver, but there's a bigger problem going on, like you just said. The car's not performing this year. Max is dragging that car, kicking and screaming to the front of the grid. You don't agree with me necessarily, but I think that's probably the fourth fastest car now after McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes. And a lesser driver in the sense that Lawson's only got 11 races to his name. And Tsunoda's got 5 seasons of experience. In that sense, it already made me wonder last year why they would be choosing Lawson. And I think now being confronted with a car that he doesn't, he's not instinctively being able to drive it. That's why he's struggling. So maybe it's a thing of maybe they're saying, listen, this guy's too young, he's too inexperienced, we made a mistake. Send him back to Racing Bulls, let him recover himself, and then let's see what Tsunoda can do. There's the school of thought that says they're actually protecting Lawson by, cutting him loose this early. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I'm not having that. I'm not having that they're protecting him at all. It's toxicity. How are you protecting a driver by sacking him after 2 Grand Prix weekends? Yes, it went badly, but you need to be asking the question. You need to be having this serious meeting behind the scenes. Why has it gone this badly? Why is this driver incapable of getting out of Q1? We had the discussion of, is the Red Bull the 4th fastest car? I can maybe believe that, but it's being made to look like the 7th or 8th fastest car. And so this is what, even in the 4th fastest car, Lawson should be getting into Q3, or at worst, like P12. To be P20 is unexplainable. And the Ted Kravitz put it to Christian Horner after the Grand Prix on China. You didn't pay off Checo Perez to get a driver who's putting in this level of performances. And we've spoken on previous pods about how you believed that Red Bull had seen data suggest that Lawson was a better prospect than Yuki, would be a better fit than Yuki. And he is sunk like a stone. I've never seen anything like it. So, like we said, I don't think that car is the best car. I think Max has overperformed it in the 2 races so far with the wet conditions in Australia and with the tyre degradation one-stop strategy that ended up happening in China. He's gotten kind of results that flatter that car. But even so, to not even be competing for top 10 for Liam Lawson, there has to be something else going on there. If it's the case of what everyone's talking about how Max drives the car in such a certain direction, then even that's a question of leadership at Red Bull. How are they letting themselves develop a car that's literally undrivable for half a dozen drivers now they've tried in that seat? How has this situation been allowed to manifest? It's on Christian Horner. It's on Helmut Marko. It's not an acceptable situation. And if anybody's thinking about going to Red Bull in the future, they're thinking it's a bad move now. from what was the best driver progression pathway on the grid to now what is unquestionably the worst.
Something that, yeah, we have to keep in mind. Yes, it's two races, but also it's a week apart. The guy might have had a bad flu, for argument's sake, and not, felt at his best in Australia, and then he didn't do that well. And then 7 days later, he's also didn't do that well. To then fire him because of that, it's such a short time span. Never mind, the number of races, the actual number of days involved here. And that's the first thing. The second thing is, in the old days, drivers were allowed to, take a car and go do laps, hundreds and hundreds of laps to get used to a car and everything else. They can't do that anymore. They can only drive in the simulator. And when Lawson was given the car to drive, yeah, I remember even in when they were doing the training runs and stuff before, testing runs before the season started, and in Australia and in China, the car was mostly up in the air, or most of the time in free practice. He never got the chance, and sprint race as well. That one practice session to get that car sorted, for him to get used to the car and everything else. So I'm saying there's so many things. The point of this to being such a blatantly unfair thing that there must be something more to it. And I'm thinking that the reason why I'm thinking there might be something to the argument that they're sort of, trying to save him almost, the fact that they just demoted him to Racing Bulls. And I'm saying this because there was a very, very strong rumor that they would actually kick him out altogether, bring Franco Colapinto into either Red Bull or the Racing Bulls, and then Yuki would go into the other seat. But the fact that they're just swapping around, they did this before in 2016 with Daniel Kvyat. I don't know if you remember that. After 4 races, they swapped him with Max Verstappen, and Max obviously went on and won his very first race, the Spanish Grand Prix of that year. That was a good thing. They swapped Gasly and Albon in the middle of the season. It's not the first time it's been done. It's the first time it's been after such a short time. But the fact that he was demoted and not fired altogether, to me, points to something else. I don't think he's in the wilderness altogether. But clearly, it's not going to do a lot of good for his confidence and his self-belief and the likes.
No, treating people like this, treating employees like this is going to be irreparable. He's going to remember this. How can he ever trust this team again after they've set him up to fail like this? And this kind of thing, culture, bleeds through the whole organization. We see it most vividly with the drivers, but this kind of thinking, this kind of how you treat employees is now going to be going through the whole culture of Red Bull and of Racing Bulls and of the whole kind of infrastructure of driver progression beneath it. It's going to bleed into everything. So this is why I'm saying this is a symptom of something bigger. We know there's been this power struggle between the Verstappen clan, the Horner clan. We know that's why Adrian Newey chose to leave. Obviously, there's a bigger power struggle happening at Red Bull as an organization with the passing of Dietrich Mateschitz and things. So like I'm saying, it's do you call it a mistake because of the performances were unacceptable, but I think they need to look at something before they look at changing the driver, honestly.
No, I agree. Something interesting that I read today, Robert Doornbos, also former Formula One driver, Dutch Formula One driver, and clearly with some links to the Verstappen family and the likes, because they're also also Dutch, said that Verstappen has already waved goodbye to the team, that he might be on his way very soon. And like you said, this is probably a symptom more of the Verstappen clan, you call it, than a Horner clash than anything else. And now apparently Max was not happy with the fact that they're letting Lawson go. He was quite adamant that he wanted to retain him, that he believed in him, and then they went against his wishes. So that's just another nail in that coffin. Do you see Max leaving that team anytime soon? I hear there's rumors he might be going to either Aston Martin or Mercedes. Do you think, honestly, he'd leave Red Bull? At the moment, that car is just not worth him staying there. I suppose in the old days, it was the best car, so you had to stick around, but not necessarily anymore.
Absolutely, I see him leaving that team. Zach Brown has said publicly that he expects Max to go to Mercedes. I think there's the Newey factor, which means that he might like to go to Aston Martin, and Aston Martin are making a lot of the right moves. I think Mercedes are being kind of exposed for how much they relied on Lewis Hamilton at the moment. It's funny, the change in the narrative about that team. Kind of no one cares about them for a start, and secondly, we're seeing the level that they truly are in terms of they're able to sneak a podium if something goes wrong for someone else, if someone else makes a mistake. And we're seeing how the narrative over the last few years was just whether George was ahead of Lewis without anyone actually paying attention to what positions they were finishing in. Now, people, if they are paying attention to Mercedes at all, are paying attention to what positions they're finishing in. But like I said, at the moment, in the first two races, they've been also rans. Yes, they finished reasonably high up on the podium, but no one really cares. Everyone's much more bothered about the other three teams. So it's a bigger gamble going to Aston Martin. But if you look at it, you can see that Aston Martin is building. You can see they're on the path to somewhere. Can you see where Mercedes are going right now?
Mm.
What big strides are they going to make? What evidence is there that they're going to be back at the front anytime soon? I'm not seeing any.
Oh, if you go to Aston Martin, you're going to be competing with Daddy's boy, Lance Stroll. If Alonso leaves, and I don't think Alonso's going to leave until he's given this new regulations, the new Honda engine, everything else, a bit of a try, at least a year of it.
Well,
So where's he
you
going to fit in?
you say that, but Alonso already doesn't have a functional relationship with Honda, which is what made it such a surprise that Aston Martin would go with Honda while he was there. So that would obviously have to be a bridge building exercise. But Alonso has been out qualified by Lance Stroll at the two events that we've had so far.
Mm.
And Lance Stroll has finished ahead of him on the road. I think Alonso didn't even finish this
Either of
one
them,
because
yeah. No, either he crashed in the first one and he broke down in the second one, yeah.
so I don't think there's any guarantee that Alonso keeps hold of that spot. That might be my wild tip. Alonso might be gone during the middle of this season because
Mm.
when Alonso decides he's had enough,
Yeah, he
he
just
doesn't
walks
change his
away.
mind back.
Mm. Well, the point is still, you go to Aston Martin now. Now, you just came from a team like Red Bull with lots of internal strife and power struggles and everything else, and you walk into Aston Martin where you've got the same situation. Daddy runs the team and his son is the other driver. You're always going to be the second choice, even if you're Max Verstappen. That doesn't make sense to me from a almost political point of view. Mercedes, I saw this afternoon for this year, the first two races, they've scored 50 points. Last year, this time, they scored only 24. So yes, maybe they're not as flashy as McLaren or Ferrari for that matter, but the point is they're consistent. Sunday's third place for George Russell was a proper, it was there on merit. I mean, he was a third fastest car after those two McLarens. I think you're maybe understating how good they are. Maybe they're just under the radar a little bit, but don't underestimate them. I'm not saying that they're the best team, but they're definitely not better than I think you believe them to be.
In what we saw in China was that on a one-stop strategy, it's a common symptom of Formula One that you basically hold position in the race, more or less. There aren't big changes in the race. And because George Russell qualified well, he is Mr. Saturday, there wasn't much opportunity for anyone to make any mistakes because there wasn't much overtaking. It wasn't a exciting Grand Prix. And yeah, because of where George Russell qualified and because of the what was going on with the tires, everyone was tire managing and everyone was fuel managing because there was no safety cars. There wasn't any changing of positions really, anything notable. And then in Australia, again, he finished where he did because cars in front of him had issues, because there was the rain factor, because there was a late safety car, etc., etc. So I'm not getting excited. That's how George Russell gets all of his best results, is people in front of him have issues. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Hmm. Interesting take. I mean, you had to qualify third in the first place on speed. And talking about qualifying, you mentioned to me you didn't have much faith in Lando Norris either. He's got the best car on the grid, but seems to be a bit mentally fragile. We saw that again in qualifying in Q3 when you had to put that final lap together. He couldn't, and it just dove into the pit. So that's where my friend Hendrik Verwoerd is adamant that Oscar is going to be the champion this year, and I'm starting to believe what he was saying because Oscar seems to be mentally stronger than Lando does. Maybe not as fast, maybe on a single lap basis, but overall maybe a little bit stronger mentally.
I think absolutely. Lando's got three problems. First, he knows that he has to perform. He knows that he must win. He knows he's got the fastest car, and he knows that if he doesn't win, everyone will say that it's because of him. His second problem is that he knows that if he doesn't perform perfectly, then he will lose positions to the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, who are in slower cars than him, but are good enough to make up the difference. Where if Lando has anything less than a 9 out of 10 weekend, he
Mm.
will finish behind those two drivers because he knows deep down that they are better than him. And finally, he knows that he's got a teammate that he hasn't mentally broken. If you look back at all of the great champions over the years, they've all broken their teammates. Max has broken every teammate that he's ever had. Lewis Hamilton has broken every teammate he's ever had, and that includes world champions. Sebastian Vettel broke Mark Webber. Fernando Alonso broke Fisichella. However far you want to go back, Schumacher, Barrichello, etc., etc. They always break their teammates. Lando has not broken Oscar, and he's had a fair while to do it now, and he's not been able to do it now. And I think that it says a bit about Oscar, but it says a lot about Lando as well. And from Lando's point of view, when I say he knows that he has to win, this is as far as we know. I know it's under debate, so the rumors are, but this is the last season of a rule iteration, and there's a big change coming next year. And he knows that there's no guarantee that McLaren carry over their advantage from this generation of cars to the next. So this could be his last chance. So the pressure that he is under, knowing that this is his best opportunity that he's ever going to have, and looking across the garage and seeing a driver who he hasn't gotten the upper hand on yet, that must be eating away at him on some level.
Yeah, and the fact that they signed Oscar to an extended contract as well, he's now staying at McLaren equally as long as Lando is going to. That says one thing. The one thing I wasn't happy about is the fact that in Australia they told Oscar to back off and not to race just after he signed that extension. And that's part of the reason why he went off the track as well, because he fell back a little bit, made a bit of a mistake and tried to come back, and it was too close to Lando, trying to prove a point, I suppose. So in that sense, I don't like the team order kind of thing, especially in that sense. I mean, there was no reason for them not to race. They are clearly the two faster cars, as long as they don't take each other out. Doesn't make a difference. But you mentioned Zach Brown now. He said the reason for McLaren's success, yes, they've got a very good driver pairing. Lewis reckons him and Charles Leclerc are better than the McLaren E also. And they've got the fastest car and everything. But Zach Brown says McLaren's secret weapon is Andreas Stella. And I think ever since Andreas Seidel left for Audi and then got fired from that job, surprisingly, McLaren's really taken big steps forward. They got Rob Marshall over from Red Bull, and I think he's a big part of the success that McLaren's experiencing at the moment. What's your thoughts about, on Andreas Stella as a team boss and the difference he's making to that team?
He seems to have just raised expectations and raised the level of everyone around him. You don't see much in terms of him. It's something tangible that he's done. People don't talk about him being a technical genius. People don't talk about him necessarily being a great strategizer or a tactician. But he just seems to have picked up a level, dragged the whole team up a level across the board. And you don't see many operational mistakes from McLaren. You don't see many strategy errors. Clearly, the technical department is working as it should. I think he's been involved in making some big decisions, like, for example, what level of car to start seasons with and then bring upgrades later, like we saw in the last two seasons where they started the season with poor cars and then recovered very quickly. So I think he's not a headline maker, but whatever he's doing, it's working. He seems to be like the WD-40 or the duct tape or something. You just apply him to any situation, it just seems to work.
Yeah, well, talking about DC3, of course, he was with Ferrari for many years. It was with Fernando Alonso at Ferrari. So that's now one team that does not have all its ducks in a row and all its plans in place. Ferrari, embarrassingly, having both their cars disqualified this weekend, one of them being your favorite driver, after the excitement of winning the sprint race, qualifying on a pole for the sprint race, and then having to radio the pit to say, listen, let Charles come past me. I can't keep up. And Charles has got a damaged front wing. What does that say about Lewis's pace in this Ferrari, number one? And what does it say about the Ferrari's pace overall?
I don't think it says much about Lewis's pace. Look, it's very difficult for me as a Lewis Hamilton fan to get upset about losing a sixth place when we've got 104 victories. Doesn't really bother me. But in terms of his pace compared to Charles, Charles was in his DRS window, and that was keeping Charles up. As soon as Charles went ahead, it was a 2 second, 3 second gap. Lewis opted to pit and finished 2 seconds behind Charles. If he hadn't have opted to pit, he maybe would have lost the place to Verstappen, whose tyre wear was better, but I think the gap between the two would have been pretty similar. So, yeah, I think it's a question to Ferrari of whether that front wing damage, what actual difference was that making? I'm reminded of, I want to say it was 2010. Felipe Massa was in a race where he got a broken front wing, and if anything, he started going faster. So I don't know. I wouldn't read too much into that. Lewis, as he's gotten older, has started making decisions of when he's not fighting for wins of races, he just goes, I see the bigger picture here. From in Lewis Hamilton's eyes, the difference between fifth and sixth is nothing. He's not that bothered. So yeah, I don't read too much into it. In terms of the disqualification, the one about the plank is weird, and Lewis got disqualified for Mercedes for a plank wear at the US Grand Prix a couple of years ago, and there was some confusion because it was suggested that the scrutineering check for the plank wasn't actually performed on Lewis Hamilton's car. That's what the paperwork says. But then it's a random check anyway. So when Lewis got disqualified for it in Austin a couple of years ago, he and a bunch of other cars all got disqualified, but they were the only cars that got checked. So the FIA didn't check the whole grid. So it's a weird one, the plank one. In terms of Charles getting disqualified for being underweight, that's what I'm saying with the tyre wear of being a one-stop strategy, which they didn't necessarily expect, and for being a race with no safety cars, where the fuel use would have been higher than they expected. That's basically it. So I'm not freaking out. Like I said, it's as I keep saying, and I'm going to keep saying for the first block of races, it's a 25 race season plus sprints. So losing a fifth and a sixth here or there doesn't cost me any sleep.
I hear that argument, but all the other teams had a one-stop strategy, and none of them, except for Pierre Gasly, were disqualified for being underweight. I mean, there definitely a mistake was made somewhere, some sort of calculation, maybe sailing a bit too close to the wind, maybe to eke out the maximum advantage. I mean, the same rule applies to everyone. So why didn't they run out of fuel? Or why weren't they underweight as well? I think it was to do mostly maybe, when they normally run after the race, when they go around the track, they run over the old discarded rubber to pick up rubber on the tires, and that picks up the weight as well. Maybe he slipped up a bit on that. Didn't do a good job there or something like that. But I mean, to say it's because of the one-stop strategy would mean it would have to apply to everybody, and it didn't. What do you think of that?
Well, it only applied to when you say it applied to everybody, it only applied to Charles. Lewis was disqualified for a different
No,
reason.
no. I mean, other teams would have run, then it would have also then been underweight. That's what I'm trying to say, if the same argument applies. They all had one-stop strategies. They all had the same fuel use and everything else. I think Ferrari just made a mistake, a calculation mistake with Leclerc now specifically, not talking about Lewis.
Yeah, with Leclerc. But
Mm.
we also maybe that's why Leclerc was able to be faster than Lewis because he was using up his tires too much and he was burning too much fuel, which Lewis didn't do.
That early in the race, I don't know. That's anyway interesting. Listen, talk to me about the other teams. Antonelli becoming driver of the day. I mean, he was as surprised as we were. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know what's behind that. Maybe he's got a fan club. There's no justification. He started
No.
eighth, finished eighth. I didn't remember seeing him on track very much. He must just have a fan club. It happens. There was a while whilst when Max Verstappen was getting driver of the day every race as well, and sometimes he wasn't even finishing the race.
Yeah, interesting. And then our friend Jack Doohan, that guy's talking about being under pressure. He's got I think 4 penalty points now after this weekend. That's not boding well for his future.
No, well, we're kind of waiting for him to disappear anyway. Where is he now? He finished 13th in the race.
Mm.
Last car not to be lapped. Ollie Beerman finishing well ahead in terms of comparing rookies. Ollie Beerman finishing eighth. I really like Ollie Beerman. I think he's a great driver.
Ciao. I like that as well. That seems to be his
Mm.
trademark now. His trademark passing maneuver. Ciao. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So surprisingly, that from Australia to China just sort of did a 180. They were absolutely nowhere in Australia, and then in China they were right up there. With the disqualifications, but 2 cars in the points. Behrman, managed to keep the car on the road through practice, and everybody he did well. I mean, I like his driving style. I'm not sure him and Ocon are going to get along that well for much longer, if you ask me. There's definitely going to be something. Ocon is a toxic teammate, if you ask me.
I mean, that's what the evidence tells us, isn't it? That's what the data tells us from his previous teammates with what happened with Checo, what happened with Hulkenberg, what happened with Gasly. This just seems to be his track record, unfortunately. That's probably what's kept him from getting into faster cars, which he could probably perform in, is his ability to manage his temperament. Because if you flip it the other way around, why do teams keep employing him? And if his temperament is so bad, it must be because he's really fast. So
Yeah, sure. But I mean, It's the same argument that applies to Red Bull. You need a harmonious environment. The one driver must be one, and the second driver must be number two. That typically works the best. So the number two driver doesn't expect any different treatment than being a number two. McLaren's going to run into that same problem pretty soon once again, whether to have equal drivers, and then calls are going to start being made, and one of the two are going to end up unhappy. With Ocon, he seems to be a bit of a political animal, if you ask me. He would go spreading rumors or whatever. I'm talking out of my backside here, but the point is just he's an unsettling element in the team, and I don't think that's good for the. He might be fast and it might be everything else, but the team still needs to be harmonious to be successful.
Yes, although tell McLaren that in 1988 and 89. Maybe it's short term. If you're thinking short term as a team,
but that makes my argument for me. They were successful for that year, but then they split up after that year. That's the point I'm making. It didn't work out because they wouldn't work out because of the two drivers not getting along, and the team paid the price for it. And that's where I'm going.
We know the egos on these team principals. Maybe they all think, I can tame him. I can sort him out.
Okumatsu, I don't think he can do it. He's too young and inexperienced. All right, you. Thanks for that, man. I appreciate it. We're waiting with bated breath for that official confirmation. I'm wondering how Lawson is going to react when he walks into the pit next week and he needs to, don the white overalls rather than dark blue. And if Tsunoda is going to get all cocky and how he's going to do in that car. I still don't think he's going to shoot the lights out. I think he's just going to prove the point that the car is simply undrivable.
They can't put Lawson in front of the press because the questions that he's going to get asked. How old is Liam Lawson? You have to remember these about these guys. Yeah, people are still at university at that age. And I think they got to think about how they're treating people.
Yeah, you're right. It's just becoming cruel now. All right, man. Thanks. We'll talk again next week.
Okay,
Thank
mate.
you. Appreciate it.
No worries, mate. Catch you later.
Cheers.
The F1 Focus Podcast with Envia Velman and Hugh Griffin.